Hello, Internet. I have a very interesting and this is my personal favorite topic actually, and that is Angular form. So in this video, I'm going to tell you what is Angular form and how you can design a one form. So I want to show you an example, and that example is exactly in front of you. So by end of this video, you will learn how to create this clean and awesome looking UI page using an Angular framework, and you can customize it to whatever you want. I'm going to provide the few fields that I usually observe on the many sites, but you can create any form. So let's get started. In general, let's try to understand what is a form. So I'm taking a topic from very fundamental level here. So form in general in web development are ways to send a data, or it is a way to gather the data from user and send it to the server. Server, I'm referring to a backend where your system or your application is deployed and you want to get the data, accept the data, and want to process data or the store data at your server or at that some system. But in general form in a web development, it's a mechanism or it's a logical entity through which we accept input and then pass it to the server. If you want to relate to a real world analogy, so for example, if you go to any bank and you want to open your account, the time the representative in banks, they hand over one information sheet to you, one page information sheet where you have to fill in your all the details, your personal details, and basically this is the information that bank need in order to create an account for you so that they know who you are and what is the details of their customer. This is one analogy. That's why I put this image to make you understand like how you can relate the forms to a real world entity. Or for example, in the old days when you went to a bank and you want to withdraw some cash, you used to fill in some slip, hand it over to cashier, and on the basis of that information present on that piece of paper, cashier would decide, or he can then find out the exact account for their customer who is requesting to withdraw cash. The purpose of form is to gather input from user and then pass it to the system. So any kind of a input required from a user, it can be just a text input. There are so many types of input that you can accept. It can be a choices or the selection of multiple choices, drop downs or the check boxes, true or false kind of, or the toggle buttons. You can upload the files, you can upload the images. There is no limitation on which kind of files you upload. So all of these things together form as a, the types of input that you can pass to the system, and the gateway through which you pass it is nothing but your form. So as I'm saying here, it is a logical grouped model of related fields. Fields represents each information about the user. For example, in this example that I have on the right, the full name, job title, company name, websites, these are the entities, and those entities are related by some means. And that model basically here is an like if I want to register to be an advertiser, these are the related fields, these are the related information that I need to fill in so that system can process my request to identify a user. And then so in Angular there are two types of forms, template driven and the reactive form. I have talked about both of these forms in another detailed tutorial. If you haven't watched that, I highly recommend it. Although I'm going to give you a brief overview about it, but if you are interested to know in detail about it, I recommend this video. So there are two types, template driven and the reactive form. Template driven was very old approach where we used to write the codes in the view of Angular. As it says a template in the language of Angular, we refer a HTML file as a template. So you used to write the entire things which you need for form, like what is the label for particular fields, what kind of input it can accept, and if you want to put a validation and so many things. So you used to do that in a template. By template, remember in the language of Angular we refer HTML file as a template. So you used to write all those things in the template, but that was not an really great or the efficient approach, and many times developer used to face challenges in terms of maintaining it and extending it. So that's why reactive forms was introduced, and with the reactive forms it solves many challenges that was present in the old approach. So let's try to understand what is a reactive forms, and the example that I was talking about in my first slide, that example which we are going to write a code for in coming minutes, that we are going to write using a reactive forms. So let's start from the beginning. What is the reactive form? So reactive forms, it is a feature of Angular that allows developer to build a complex and dynamic forms in a reactive and a declarative way. So two things are there. It allows you to build complex and dynamic forms. What does it mean by complex? Like the inputs that you have in your form. It can be anything, any type, so it doesn't need to be a very plain input. You can pass in anything to there. Okay, and your form can be a multi-step form like I was showing here. You have steps like 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the steps you are accepting an input from the your user, so those are the steps. So all those things you can do in the reactive form. And dynamicness means you can add any fields that you want on the go, and it can be depending on the user's previous choices or some set of settings that you already did. For example, you have a payment gateway. You ask the user that which type of you ask user which type of payment method they want to choose. If they select a debit card, credit card, then you will ask for the card details. If they choose a UPI, then you will ask for the UPI ID likewise. So that is the dynamicness and the language of web development. It says that depending on the previous inputs or some settings, you can decide how your form should look like. So that you can do with the reactive forms. That's a plus point. Reactive forms in Angular is a way of building forms that are based on reactive programming principles. So whatever I was just talking about, it's reactive principles. Reactive means your application reacts to a decision user made, the inputs user passed to it, or some settings that are pre-configured. It uses the observables. If you don't know observables, it's a RxJS concept where it is intended for the asynchronous code, asynchronous programming. So I'm not going to go in detail, but it uses the observable patterns so that your reactive forms are pretty robust. With reactive forms, developer can define the form controls, their validator, and their default values. Form controls, you can pass like what kind of a control you want. Like if you want to put some values already there, like predefined values. If you want to add some validators like the regular expression we have for the email IDs, or if you want to just give some set of values that only user can select, or some fields will be mandatory depending on some choices. And there are limitless possibilities. If you are aware of the regular expression, you can write any regular expression that you want in your input field. Or if you have other types of limit, like if you have a file upload, you can add the validators there to specify that only user can pass some few selected extensions of the files. Benefits that reactive forms gives us is a better performance. Reactive forms provide a better performance by reducing the number of DOM updates. So DOM updates, if you are watching my videos, you must be aware of that. I regularly talks about this DOM. So remember, in the Angular framework, the DOM is an essential part for your deciding the performance and the overall loading time. DOM stands for the document object model, and it is nothing but the HTML tree that is formed in the browser. So this is what you are seeing here. This is the DOM. It starts from the HTML, then I have head, body, blah blah, and ultimately I'm somewhere in the div. So this is the DOM, and it is calculated at runtime. The DOM updates, if you need very few DOM updates, that means your application is pretty fast, and that's what Reactive Forms provides us. So that's why it is helping us in a better performance. Complex forms, you can design any complex form. There is no limitation that you have. You can do a multi-state forms or conditional fields from the arrays or from the groups or whatever data you get from backend. You can consider any complex scenario. You can implement them using reactive form. Testing becomes very easy with reactive forms. You can automate the testing. Now we are living in an era where we have moved far away from the manual testing, and Angular have the very great frameworks like the Jest, Jasmine, which is built into it. Then like Karma, Protector, those things basically helps you to execute the test cases. So let's understand the technical building blocks of it. So Angular, we need to import the reactive forms module in our app module or wherever you are creating this form UI page. Then we create a form group object, and that form group object basically has the form control. Form group is a, imagine it as an entire form that I was showing, and the form controls are the fields of it. So in this example, this become an advertiser. This is a form group for me, and this full name, job title, company name, these are the form controls in the language of Angular. So I hope that makes sense. So that's what they are referring here. Then form group API is something with using which we can manipulate the values. What I mean by manipulating values, if I want to put some placeholder, like in this case, I have a job title as a placeholder. If I want to bind some value which is already will be displayed there by default, I can do that with a form group API. So that's where form group API allows me to play around with or manipulating the values of it. Overall, reactive forms is a powerful feature of Angular that makes it easier to build dynamic and complex form with a less code and better performance, and that's what a developer wants. So let's move to the VS Code, and our goal through this code or this project is to create a exact looking form like this. So we are going to write a code, and we are going to create a page, a UI page a web page exactly looking like this. So let's first create a new Angular project using ng new. Let's call it form example. Don't want routing and I want just simple CSS. It will take some time to install the packages. Let's skip it. All right, after installing the packages, let's move to the forms example. Let me clear this and I can see that I have a node modules installed. So next thing I'm going to do is I want to create a one component. Let me get rid of the boilerplate code that is already added in my HTML file. So I'll just simply delete it and I want to add one new component. So for that I'm using this extension, but you can use a command, but with the extension it's really easy. So I will just uh, create a new component. Let's call it user registration form. Hit enter and there we go. I have the new component created and what I will do is simply, so I will just add the selector that I copied. So just hit enter space. Yeah, so with this I have the selector added, and if I go to the local host, I don't know whether I have run the project. Let me run it again to see and just do an ng serve. And once my ng serve is complete, I can see that on my local host the application is running. Now let's write the code for the form. Before going to that, I will use one library that is tailwind CSS. So tailwind CSS I'm going to use for creating the input elements and adding the styles to it. If you don't know how to set it up, I have a separate video that you can watch, but though I will again tell you how you can do it. So let's install the tailwind. Let me go to the project directory and I will install the npm tailwind npm install tailwind css. So meanwhile it installs, let me talk about the tailwind. So tailwind is a really good library. It allows you to define the css to your html, and that is also at age that you don't have to leave your html file. So there are ample of classes present into it to specify the margin, to specify the font color, background, anything you can specify with the help of it. So same we are going to use for this example. So I have my tailwind installed. So next thing I want to do is run this tailwind package, and for that I will use npxx. And in order to set up the tailwind you need to do an init command. So once I do an npx uh, tailwind init, I can see that in my project structure there is a new file tailwind config.js added. You need to do an additional change in this content array. You need to specify what kind of a files you want your tailwind to be supported. So in our case we are going to write the tailwind classes in the HTML, so that's why we provided the HTML, and JS is something that you need to provide because at the end the Angular artifacts are in the format of the JavaScript. So after that we need to add a few lines into our style.css file, which is present in our, if I just go to the app, yeah, there is a style.css. You need to add few lines into it. That lines are to import the tailwind css libraries. So I will simply paste this import into my style css, and now I'm good with the tailwind setup and I can use the tailwind classes uh, in my application basically. So we need to create a form which will look like this. So let's start to add the elements into it. First thing to remember, whenever you are dealing with the forms, you need to import a reactive form extension in your module file. So let's import that reactive forms module in our app module, so that whenever we'll use any form group or form control elements in our controller, it won't throw an error to us. First thing I want to do is I just want to add a simple division box, and I want to show that division blocks in a light blue, and it should consume the entire space of my page. So let's add a simple division. So remember, these classes that I'm adding here, these are coming from the tailwind, and these are the classes that basically specify how I want to arrange the content. The height should be full, width should be full, and the background I want to keep a blue. The one I'm using here is I think 5 by 6, where I want to specify the height, that is 83%. So if I just do an I still need to add a content because I don't have anything yet. It's just like a structure that I created. So I want to add two boxes inside it, and same thing I did here. I specified the height and the width. So let me add a simple form, and that form basically I have specified a form group as a general info, and the reason that I see an error here because I have not defined that in my component ts yet. So first thing I will do is to create a form group. So I need to import the form builder, form group and validators. Then I will create a form group object, general info form, because I want to make a UI which look like this. So I will create two forms. One is general information, second is contact details. This dot general info form, I have created the group of it. Then I need to make one on submit method that will be called, that will be invoked once I submit this form. This is the data that I will need for one of the fields, so ignore it for time being. And this is for the another form. So now coming to the fields of the form, you can see that I'm adding fields into my form, and I need a title, first name, last name, position, business code, and those things. These are the, if you see the syntax of it, you can see there are two inputs. First is represents the value that you want to bind to your element, and second is a validator. I'll come to the validator part in detail in the coming minutes. Don't worry about the code. I have all the code that I wrote. I have pushed it to a Git repository on a GitHub, and that you will find the link to that Git repository you will find in the description of this video. So you can clone it, and then you can understand everything about how I implemented code. You can set it up on your local and run it. Code is given in the link below. Please refer the description. So let me switch this to the side view. And what I did is I created a simple box which I want to put it in center, and like the way I want to implement our form, which is looking like this, I created two boxes here. And I have two forms, basically general information and the contact details, that I'm going to write a code for here now. So in the general information, let's create a form first. So I created a form, and as you can see, the form group I have specified is a general information. So general info form, the variable which I created here in my component, same I'm referring, and this is where my reactive forms comes into a picture. With this object, it is able to understand that HTML, the form element needs to pick a data from the general info form object. Then I have a ng submit, and this is basically indicate whenever user will submit a form, which method it want to call. So in my case, I want to call on submit method, and in that I just simply want to console log the data that I accepted on the UI. So for that, I'm just using a general info form and value. Value is a property that basically tells the all the fields in the form, that just outputs all the fields in the form, but you can access the single values of it using another method which is get. So you can use that to get a specific properties of the this reactive form. Then I have created this header which is looking like this here, and now I want to add a select box. So for that, I have created a select tag, and I have given a form control name which basically coming from here. And as I was saying, that I created a object of form a group, and inside that I have form controls. So this title I am referring here, and these are the classes for my tailwind. One additional thing, additional enhancement I did is inside that select box, I want to render the values, I want to render the options which are present in my TS. In the real scenarios, it actually can come from some API, and in that cases we need to bind the values. But for the just sake of this demonstration, I have put the title options here in the TS, where I have value and the label, and this value, this entries basically I want to attach, I want to bind it to the select box. So that's why I use a ng for as a structural directive, and inside that I have a let option of title option. So when I'll go to the UI, I can see that a title as a drop down is added, and I have the fields also listed. So I will write a more code to add a few more fields. So similarly, I'll add a first name. Then instead of the title, I'm giving the form control as a first name. Then these are the classes that I have added from the tailwind. So I want to width has to be full. The text of the label, sorry, the text inside the input box, I want to show it in the gray 700, which is a code for this particular color. Then I want to I don't want outline, and I want only a border bottom. So this is because in our this form we just have one horizontal line below that basically so that basically means there is only a border down below, there is only a bottom border, and there is no outline. So for that reason I am writing this line that focus outline is none and border bottom only. So likewise, I will add a code for other fields like last name and a few other. Then I have one more business area code. and I want to show you that how you can add a validators for it. So if you can see, there is some additional argument to these fields, which is validator. So this validator basically you can specify anything. So in these cases, I have specified that I want this field to be required, which means until and unless these fields are there, my button or I will not allow user to submit a form. And in case of business area code, I wrote a different validator where I'm saying that I want a minimum length of this field to be 3. And let's see if that is true or not. So we'll see that in a moment. But before that, let me add other fields. So I have added a file input also, and that I will come a little in some time. So let's have a few more inputs here, and then I want to add one is form valid. I just want to show that one concept of if the form is valid or not. Then I have a submit button. Now let's go to the UI. So as you can see that I have the things added here, and I can select the values for this, and the UI is as I wanted, like I only wanted a border bottom. And you can see that I intentionally added this line over here which says that whether the form is valid or not, and it says the form is not valid because, and it currently says that it is false. So that is because I want to demonstrate the use of validators. So currently if you see in my TS, I put that I want all the fields to be required. So that means if there is no value for this field, or if it's not following any validators rule, that means my form is invalid. So currently I just have enter value for this title, and that's only value. So if I enter all the values, I'm just entering any dummy values here to this. And I think I have a file upload also that is also required. And if I add the file, now you can see that the is form valid has turned to true from the false. That is because I have entered all the values in the fields. And if I go back again and change any rules like this, in case of business area code, if I just enter input which is less than 3 characters, my form validity is again turning to false. And that is because in my validators I have specified this condition that for the business area code I want a minimum length of the 3, and when a length became less than 3, the validity turned to false. So this is what I was talking when I was explaining about the benefits of form, and this point that reactive form is a way of building form. It is based on the reactive programming principles. So the changes that are happening on your web page, they are your form is basically adapted. Coming back, so I will just add some data into it. I intentionally added this file input here, and that is because I wanted to demonstrate to you the usage of file. So in my case, I have added an additional, I went a step ahead, and it's not just like a file upload that I wanted to demonstrate, but additionally I wanted to tell you or show you that how you can specify the custom type of files that you if you want to restrict the file upload. So in my case, I just wanted to allow user to upload spreadsheets and the CSV file. So that's where I have specified the accept only .csv, and this is the format for the spreadsheet or the XML, XLSS files in the Windows. And on the file, on the change of this file, I am calling a method which is on file change, and I'm passing this event. And like we do for the usual all the fields, I just pass the form control name as a file, which is basically this one in my general info form offset. And if I go below in my on file change, there I'm just accepting the event, and I'm just console logging the files that I have accepted there. If it is not able to find the CSV or the style sheet, it will show that no items match your search, because we strictly have specified that we want to accept only CSV and the spreadsheet. So whenever it will see those files, that time only it will allow you to choose the file. So if I click on this file, you can see immediately I have this console log here where it says that what is the name of the file. So this was the file I accepted, and if I want to see what is the size of it, what's exactly the content, that I can access inside this object. So this is how uh, you can accept a file from the user, and then you can pass it to your server. There are a few other things that I wanted to demonstrate here, like the dirty, touch, invalid. These are the properties of every form control element, and if they are true, that means there is something wrong. Touch basically represents you have entered some value, into it, and then dirty also represent if you have added something onto it, and invalid basically tells if your validator rules are pass or fail. Then you can see in this checkbox, I have showed one checkbox where there is a terms and conditions selection, and the reason that is selected by default is in my value here I have passed it as a, like in the terms form control I have said that the initial value I want it to be a true. So if I say a false, it will be unchecked this time. So yeah, you can do it for any fields, like if I want to bind some value, or let's say for the position I want to keep developer as a position always, so I can say that the developer value will be there and the user can change it whatever they want it later. And similarly, we'll add a write section, which is another form. So I have created an object contact details form, and that you can find here in the contact details form. Similarly, I have added the properties, and so let's see here, and I can see the form is created, which is pretty much identical to what we wanted. But this was the intention of this video, to explain you about what is the Angular forms, how it works, and how you can create a Angular form on your UI page. So I hope you find this video useful, and thank you for watching.